Dear viewer, I've got the Green New Deal on my mind. Specifically, I've been thinking over a lot of the criticisms that keep floating around about it, and specifically of that, how they relate to things as they are today. So, what are they? Obviously, there's the concern about cost, there's concern about does it do enough. I'd like to first look at how things are now, because that paints a clear picture of how feasible a Green New Deal is. How things are now is we do use tax money. We use all kinds of tax money to finance, subsidize our current energy infrastructure to the tune of $650 billion per year as a conservative estimate. That comes out to about $2,000 per year per person, and that is on existing infrastructure. Notably, most of, or at least a bit of that money is not staying here. It is to the likes of Saudi Arabia, Iran, anywhere that we are importing oil from. And it is, of course, having a questionable impact on our environment. I can say personally, when I was close to a coal plant, I had all kinds of respiratory issues. Since distancing myself from that coal plant, those cleared up instantly, and here a few years later I've begun hearing cases of people getting all forms of rare cancer out near that coal plant. Someone thought it was a great idea to put a housing development there, and that's going to keep happening because we like to develop land. Now, what that means is we are effectively socializing our current energy infrastructure. It is not a free market solution that is standing on its own. It is not competing. It has no competition. And these are the very roots of right-wing attacks, in particular against the Green New Deal. We don't balk at the cost to each of us that goes into these oil companies and in turn goes into Saudi Arabia because we're already indoctrinated to accept it. And that's one thing that I question. But for the sake of this argument, I'd like to just assume those same numbers. I've seen for the Green New Deal an estimate of something absurd for, in particular, the cost to keep a job for every... I don't find that figure realistic at all, but I do find the figure for shifting over to greener energies to be plausible. That figure was quoted at something like 1.8 trillion across 10 years. If it's 1.8 trillion across 10 years, that's 180 billion per year. That's a fifth of what we're spending today on oil. Bake in an amount on top of that for the proposed healthcare and such, and you can probably approach 650 billion per year. Again, what we're currently spending in subsidies for our energy infrastructure, except if we're going that way, well, we're getting a lot more out of it. I would be content to continue spending 650 billion per year just on energy. I just disagree about which energy infrastructure it should be funding. If we did shift to purely renewables, if we shifted to green alternatives that are sustainable here, what that would mean is not only would we see more innovative jobs created, not only would we see environmental impacts lessened, we would also keep that money here in the United States rather than sending it abroad. I can't actually comprehend how one can take the position to be against government subsidy of energy and against basically propping up foreign government economies while still touting what we do with the oil industry. And there's no political party which is actually in favor of a purely free market energy solution, or at least not a major major American political party. Between the two proposals, keep things as they are or shift, realistically, the only difference that I can perceive is what type of energy we're getting and which country gets to keep the money at the end of the day. I really cannot comprehend it. It's full of contradiction to scream about socializing our energy infrastructure and the jobs that go into it, when that is what we are currently doing. The other component of it is, of course, things like improving mass transit and things like that. If we can get there, that's great. That's always an interesting dance to play because people do like their personal cars. But I don't see anything in the proposal which would forbid people from keeping a personal car or continuing to drive it all over however they see fit. It just requests investment into more technology. If that technology proves feasible, then we'll see it come to fruition. I don't see investing in technology as a bad thing. That's what an even larger chunk of our tax money goes towards, especially into the military, where we spend hundreds of billions, trillions even, on developing new technology. Not all for military use. Much of it is for civilian use. So these things are not without precedent. In fact, they are how things work today. This is not suddenly a destruction of capitalism and the rise of the Soviet United States. This is the status quo, just with different actors actually getting the money, and with that money ultimately staying within the borders of the US. That's how I perceive it. I'm sure that there's things that I'm missing. There's also the fact that it's an incomplete picture at the moment because it's largely just a policy proposal. It's not really a full fleshed out package yet. And as those details come in, when they come in, they can be certainly scrutinized and should be. But it should be scrutinized from the lens of, is this an improvement over how things are now, rather than, is this a perfect solution? We're not going to get a perfect solution on any issue, ever. That's just the way legislation works. Anyway, that's my off-the-cuff random rambling for the night. I hope this is useful to someone. I just had to get it off my chest, because I keep reading these arguments that on their face look wildly hypocritical and nonsensical. Talk to y'all later.